Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined by the one and only Weston Hodkowitz. We're coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field. And Wes, let's just pick up our discussion where we left off a couple of days ago, talking about the 2021 Packers draft class. We worked through the first 2 days / 3 rounds of the draft the other day. So day 3, rounds 4 through 7, and it started for the Packers with one pick late in the 4th round because they had traded their other late 4th round pick to move up in the 3rd round to select Amari Rodgers from Clemson. And this was the second of the 3 times in this draft the Packers addressed the offensive line, getting tackle/guard Royce Newman from Ole Miss. Now this is kind of seems like almost like your classic Green Bay Packers offensive line pick, right? A guy who's played both tackle and guard in college at a high level, at a big-time program. And I would think that the Packers would probably try to start him at tackle first and see where he goes from there. That's where he finished his college career for the Rebels.
Well, and we start this show talking about day 3 of the NFL draft. Well, why does that matter? We're talking about the late rounders. But the thing you got to understand and appreciate is the history of the Green Bay Packers in the 4th round with offensive linemen.
Absolutely.
This is where they got Josh Slaton. You know, this is where they've been able to find the David Bakhtiaris, the J.C. Treaders, being able to, all-pro, Pro Bowler, future Packer Hall of Famers type players. So again,
T.J. Lang 4th round, Corey Linsley
Correct.
5th round. I mean, the list is pretty long.
Yeah, and being able to unearth those type of players is one big reason why Green Bay has been able to stay ahead of the curve here on the offensive line over the years. So let's blend that into Royce Newman. What I really like about this young man is you mentioned the versatility. This is a guy that also at the Senior Bowl said, hey, yeah, I'll take some snaps at center too.
Yeah.
Wherever you want me to play, I'm willing to do it. And being able to have his type of body type, I love that too. I mean, we were talking yesterday about, Josh Myers, and that's a guy that's 6'5", 310. Royce Newman, 6'5", 310, right in that same range. But he was at left guard. He flipped over to right tackle at Ole Miss. He did a little bit of everything, and I just feel like when you have a guy that is his type of intangibles, a guy that we believe was a 4-star recruit coming out of Illinois, and you mix in just that various diversified background and developmental base at Ole Miss, I just think you're getting a prospect that is going to be able to come in and compete at a number of levels. The comparison, I know Brian Gutekunst doesn't like getting into comparisons, but outside of Lambeau Field, a lot of comparisons to Billy Turner, and I see it. I think there's a lot of athleticism there, and if he needs to play at tackle, I think this is a guy that could very easily come in and start his career there without needing to kind of mix and match.
Yeah, and we'll have to see, as we've been talking about all along, just how the Packers are going to navigate through training camp and with what David Bakhtiari's timeline is with the recovery from his ACL and who's going to start out at left tackle. Maybe it is Billy Turner that moves over there, and then the Packers are looking for a right tackle where Royce Newman would certainly compete. But regardless, even if Billy Turner is at right tackle, you need a backup at right tackle as well. With Rick Wagner no longer around here in Green Bay, so Newman would certainly be a candidate there. And we'll jump ahead a little bit. I know we touched on him on our last show, but then the 3rd pick in the offensive line in the 6th round, Cole Van Lanen from Wisconsin. Now this is a young man who he earned his stripes at Wisconsin. The redshirt year, a couple years as a backup fill-in player, jumbo package type of guy, and then his last 2 seasons in the red and white, he was the starting left tackle for Wisconsin. Started, I believe it was 18 or 19 games total at left tackle. So again, is Cole Van Lanen going to be starting at left tackle for the Packers in week 1 of 2021? Probably not. You don't totally rule it out, but I would say probably not. But again, you need a backup there. You need somebody to be able to step in if something were to happen during a game with however the Packers line up at the start of the season.
Well, this episode I think could almost be titled "History Lessons with Hod." If you want to use that for the little subhead on there, go ahead.
Yeah,
by all means.
All right.
But okay, we just got done talking about the rich history of the Packers in the 4th and 5th round. Let's talk about the rich history of the Wisconsin Badgers in the 6th and 7th rounds. I mean, this is something, Mike, where okay, I get it. You've had your Joe Thomases of the world. maybe the best that's ever done it at left tackle. But you've also had Mark Tauscher come out of the 7th round. Rick Wagner, who finished his season and possibly his career last year with the Packers, was a 6th-round pick. And now you have Cole Van Lanen coming out here from Bayport High School. A guy that, again, was a pretty heralded recruit when he went to Wisconsin, but he wasn't given anything. He had to earn those reps, and it was a deep offensive line that he had to kind of crack his spot into. And now here he is, being able to have 5 years in Madison, I think will have done him well. I'm hoping here in the next week to talk to Joe Rudolph, the Badgers offensive line coach and associate head coach, and just the way that they've been able to develop offensive linemen in Madison from the Barry Alvarez era all the way up until now. That's been the hallmark. I think when you looked at the blueprint for what Wisconsin did to get its program to where it's been over the last 30 years, it's trusting the talent in the state of Wisconsin in the trenches, and obviously Cole Van Lanen has been the next guy to kind of pick up that flag and carry it on.
Yeah, and a lot of people point to when they're trying to, nitpick and whatnot with these draft picks, people point to, Van Lanen only had 22 reps on the bench press at Wisconsin's Pro Day or whatever. Well, look at the history of Wisconsin offensive linemen and the combine, the Pro Day results. The Badgers, their strength and conditioning program does not focus on the bench press. That is not something that measures the quality of the offensive lineman that Wisconsin turns out. You have to have your faith in their system. Now, that's not to say, not every guy works out, obviously, but the Badgers have put a lot of offensive linemen into the NFL, and there aren't any of them who have done the 36, 37 reps on the bench press. That's not how they work down there. That's not how they produce it. So I'm curious to see what happens with Van Lanen, because he is a guy who spent 5 years in college. Including the redshirt year, and you look at a lot of these guys across the board in this draft, Wes. There are so many guys that come out a year early. Even some guys who have a redshirt year and then just 2 years of playing, and then they enter the draft. This is a young man who has a certain level of maturity to him, and as I said before, he earned his stripes at Wisconsin. He wasn't just handed a starting job, no matter how highly touted a recruit he was coming out of Bayport. Those are the kind of guys that that they get drafted in the late rounds. They know how to work their way through a process and earn it somewhere along the way, and that's what I'm curious to see if Cole Van Lanen can continue to do that in his career.
100% right, and it's one thing to have gifts. Doesn't matter if it's on the best bench press, doesn't matter if it's your short shuttle time, but to be able to incorporate your gifts into your game, that's where the finesse, that's where the technique comes in. Corey Linsley put up 35 bench reps at Ohio State his last year, I should say, at the Combine.
Yeah.
Corey incorporates that power into how he played the center position. Some guys will do 23, 24. Some will do 19. How do they use what their other talents are, and how does that translate to how they play the game? What is their footwork like? What is their pad level like? What are all the different attributes that they have, and how do they incorporate that into how the player that they are? That's the one thing I think Wisconsin has done an exceptional job at. If offensive line play, if defensive line play was all about power and strength and just who has the best day in the weight room, you'd see a bunch of bodybuilders on the offensive line. That's not how the game is played. Sometimes it works. Sometimes you do things differently to succeed at this level.
Yeah, absolutely. Quickly here, Wes, some sponsor business. Sirius XM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365.
Oh, I mentioned this too. I always love this part of the offseason program when it's guys like you and me, real physical savants here, that get to break down being able to put up 22 reps of 225 pounds. I was down in the Packers workout area on Tuesday. I did 10 reps of 125 pounds, Mike. I got up. I felt like I was a superhero.
There you go.
Now, if you put 225 on there, somebody from security might have had to see the little, me struggling there and send somebody down to help me out. But I always enjoy that. Like Jared Abbrederis. Remember Jared Abbrederis got dogged because he did like 4?
Yeah, he only had 4.
Only had 4 of 225. I love the level that these guys have to, kind of play at and perform at to be considered a good athlete.
Yeah, right. Well, in the 5th round, the Packers turned their attention to the defensive side of the ball. 2 selections in the 5th round: defensive lineman T.J. Slaton from Florida, and then cornerback Shemar John Charles from Appalachian State. And I've had a couple of inbox readers emphasize to me that it is not Appalachian State, it's Appalachian State. So I'm going to try to stick with that. In elementary school, I was told they were the Appalachian Mountains. So I'm sorry, that's just what's ingrained in my head since age 6. But I will try to pronounce Appalachian State correctly here as we move forward.
My good friend Darren Gant, an Appalachian State alumnus, he also was making sure that I was correct on that pronunciation. But I think what happens in the state of Wisconsin, we're so used to saying A. Yeah. And I think it just rolls off as Appalachian. But either way, to transition back into our conversation here, John Charles, I think, has everything. I'm so excited about this guy as a 5th-round pick. You can look at the PFF numbers. I know they had him ranked as like the 16th best prospect in this year's draft when you look at all the score things and, athletically the metrics. But I just think a guy puts up 19 bench reps, to go back to the bench reps thing, weighing, 195 pounds?
He weighs 190, actually.
190?
Yeah.
That is remarkable to be able to have that kind of physical strength. And again, getting back to what I said in the last segment, he incorporates that into his game.
Yeah. Well, the thing that stands out about John Charles in terms of the statistics is over the last 2 years, the number of passes broken up. He only had 2 interceptions the last 2 years, 1 in each season, but double-digit PBUs, as they say, passes broken up, had, I believe it was 10 or 11 in 2019, and then, including the interception, 16 or 17, which was one of the top numbers, if not the top number in the country in 2020. And, I'm sure we'll probably hear from him, and I'm sure he would like to say, I should have had more interceptions, because if I can break up that many passes, like Jair Alexander likes to say, if I can get my hand on the ball, then I should be able to pick it off, right? But if a guy is in that type of position and getting challenged like that by opposing offenses, and he's up to that challenge, yes, Appalachian State does not play at the level of some of the opponents.
They beat Michigan once.
What's that?
They beat Michigan.
Yeah, that was a while back. Yeah, that's true. But this is a guy who he's going to have a big transition to make from Appalachian State to the NFL. But there's a lot of things on film and about his body type, 6'1" or 5'11", I think.
5'11".
5'11", yeah. 5'11", 190. There's a lot of things to like about this young man, and he's not someone the Packers are going to ask to play 40 snaps a game right away as a rookie. This is a developmental guy they can bring along and see what they have a little ways down the road. 2
things to that. One, what I absolutely really love about where he comes from and how he goes about this game is he said he's not a 4-star recruit. I think he was a 2-star recruit. Was pretty much overlooked coming out of Florida, the state of Florida, and was able to go to Appalachian State, earn himself a job, play special teams, and then become a really big difference maker in their defense. As you mentioned, if you don't see a lot of interceptions, the next thing you look for is PBUs. But it doesn't stop there. You have to look at the completions, because if a guy is just being thrown on constantly, he's going to have a lot of pass breakups, because the law of averages. What's impressive about John Charles, though, is that he didn't have a lot of completions given up. I think it was something like 5 in single coverage last season, something ridiculous. And he had as many PBUs as he did. He was tough to throw on. He was on his own island. Now, again, the caliber of athlete he's going to see is going to increase. The challenges are going to increase. But the Packers needed to get back to this, Mike. I mean, you can't just be spending first-round pick after first-round pick on that position. You got to eventually find some of those, Sam Shields, Tremont Williams, Micah Hyde in the 5th round.
Right.
Some guys that are going to end up really rising up and becoming difference makers for you. And John Charles is a guy, to me, on paper, as a prospect, is the type of guy you want to have in your system.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, on the defensive line, T.J. Slaton from Florida. Now, this is an interesting young man, because there were reports that he played as big as 360 pounds while he's with the Gators. The pro day weight, I believe, was around 330 pounds. And then he told reporters after he was selected by the Packers that he actually wants to get down to about 320.
Yeah.
But at whatever, from what we can tell, at whatever weight he is playing at, this young man is an athlete. He's a big body who can move. Now, he doesn't have a lot of flashy pass rush stats in terms of the sacks and quarterback hurries and things like that. But he's got the athletic ability. He's got the athletic ability to hold the point. And The interesting thing here to me, and we had talked about defensive line obviously being a need for the Packers going into this draft, but it was a draft class that was very thin at the position from what all the experts were saying. So the Packers didn't really get that interior pass rusher maybe to complement a Kingsley Keke or a Kenny Clark. But with Joe Barry, we've heard, based on the history, like with what the LA Rams were doing last year, a lot of five-man fronts. Yep. Which means you're going to have, a lot of times you're going to have three defensive linemen on the field. If you're going to have three defensive linemen on the field a lot, you're going to have to be rotating those guys because you don't want those guys having to play 7, 8, 10, 12 snaps in a row. That's not how they're built. That's not what they're designed to do. So Slaton is a guy that I see as, being potentially that rotational player. And then when you need to load up in a short yardage or a goal line situation, that's definitely a body you're going to put in the middle of that defense.
So many reasons why he made sense for the Packers at this point in time. I know some readers were asking us, well, they got away from those type of bigger defensive tackles. Well, what happened is the league adjusted to and things evolved. You saw more multi-packages with tight ends, more bunch formations, more run-oriented offenses on first and second down, and defenses once again had to react to that. So that's why you're seeing, Snacks Harrison get signed in the middle of last season or late last season. That's why you're seeing them go and sign an Anthony Rush, because sometimes you got to get those big guys again in the middle. They're going to be able to take some of those reps off of your Kenny Clarks and your Kingsley Kekes. Now, that being said, what I love about Slaton is, you're right, he got as high as 360, that were the reports, but he showed a lot of discipline last year to be able to get his body weight down to 330. He knew this was his shot. He had to become a starter. He had to become an impact player on that defense, and he did that in the ways in which he, with what his skill set aligns to. But at 6'5", if he does get into that 320 range, that's an impressive physical specimen. And you hear all these things about, the dunking in high school and just the natural athlete is there.
Yeah, apparently he can do a backflip.
Yeah, I mean, and if you look at his numbers, Mike, his short speed and his 10-yard dash, they always talk about quick twitch. He has that. So I think, as I said after the draft, and I think it was on Twitter, maybe it was an inbox. So many things happened that week, Mike, it was hard to keep track. But if you look at his stats and in the pros and cons and his scouting report, a lot of the perceived weaknesses, I think are things that are correctable, things that can be done with discipline, with coachability, being able to work with a player. The Packers had to add an offensive or defensive lineman. It had to happen. They needed more depth there, and I think Slaton is a really intriguing piece for them there in the 5th round.
Well, the last two selections for the Packers in this 9-player class, one late in the 6th round, one late in the 7th round. Isaiah McDuffie, a linebacker from Boston College, second straight year the Packers take a BC player after drafting A.J. Dillon in the 2nd round a year ago. And then Kylin Hill, running back from Mississippi State, the Packers' 7th round pick. Starting with McDuffie, this is a young man. I should have mentioned this about John Charles as well. Quick little aside. I think one of Brian Gutekunst told us a lot of stories in his press conferences over the weekend. One of my favorite ones was how he described there were a few scouts on his staff who really, really liked John Charles, and when he was still available on day 3, and they got to late in the, into the 5th round, he said the guys kept tapping him on the shoulder and pointing to John Charles's name on the board, say, "Hey, don't forget about that guy." And Brian eventually selected him. But John Charles was also a special teams regular at Appalachian State, played a lot of special teams over his 4 years there, and I think he's going to get a shot to do that with the Packers. Isaiah McDuffie is a linebacker. To me, he's in that upper 220s, I believe 227, 228. He, to me, has the body type that says this is a guy, even if he's not going to play a whole lot on defense maybe as a rookie, but this is a guy who could step in on special teams and give a little bit of a boost to Mo Drayton's units here.
Yeah, and I don't want to – I'm very careful with this comparison because I know a lot of people would say, well, that's an undrafted free agent. That's a guy who really didn't work out in Green Bay. But I did see a lot of similarities between him and Joe Thomas. And what I mean by that is, from a special teams perspective, 6'1"-ish, 6'2", high 220s, low 230s, that's pretty prototypical for a special teams, a core 4 special teams player. Guy that can be on the blocking units, can also cover. I think, and it really sounds like McDuffie relishes those type of roles. But I think athletically there's more upside there as a defensive player. Now, again, we don't really, I've kind of given up on trying to figure out, okay, what the depth chart is going to look like at inside linebacker, because truthfully, even though I talked to him after the draft last year, I never anticipated that Chris Barnes would end up being the Mike linebacker for most of the season, the second leading tackler on the defense behind Adrian Amos. And there it was, because Kamal Martin got hurt. Christian Kirksey didn't really work out as the every down backer. So you never really can say, well, this guy won't be a starter, or he will be a starter, until you actually see it on the grass. So what I do like what Green Bay has done is they've got themselves a nice core of inside linebackers that, okay, you got Barnes, you got Kamal Martin, two guys that could be real, possible pieces to build around on the defense if you tighten some stuff up. Ty Summers has been a core special teams player. Maybe McDuffie pushes him for that spot. Oren Burks is still sort of between the two positions. So Brian Gutekunst said after the draft they could still explore a free agent if there's one available. The unrestricted free agent period, by the way, ended on Tuesday, so anybody that gets signed now veteran-wise wouldn't count towards next year's compensatory equation, so there is that route. But otherwise, you have a bunch of guys under the age of 25 that are competing for spots right now, and McDuffie adds to that competition.
Yeah, well, and defensively, certainly McDuffie, a tackling machine type at Boston College, had, I believe it was 107 tackles last season, which was just under 10 tackles per game.
Top 5 in the country.
He racked them up. Got guys on the ground, and you certainly like to see that. Last but not least, Kylin Hill, the running back from Mississippi State. Your thoughts on this young man? It
just seems to me like a perfect 7th round pick, because the guy has credentials. He was a pretty big recruit going into Mississippi State. Basically had to go through that whole wave, and he rode it out with the program, the head coaching changes, the position coaching changes. He came back this year after a really solid junior season.
Yeah, 2019, this guy, over 1,300 yards rushing, 10 touchdowns in the SEC, was actually one of the all-conference running backs in that league. Then in 2020, played a few games and opted out. So his 2019 season is the one you really have to go on, and he was a big-time producer.
Yeah, and I don't know everything that went into the decision. I think he only had something like 18 carries for 50-some yards this past year, so maybe that ended up hurting his stock. But Green Bay Packers, man, there's a huge opportunity. You can look at the 7th-round pick status, but the reality is they need a number 3 running back.
Yep.
There has to be one, and you have him. You have Dexter Williams coming back off the practice squad. Patrick Taylor is the guy you got to kind of keep your eye on. He was probably going to be a draftable player out of Memphis before all the issues with, I don't know if that was a Liz Frank or whatever his foot issue was. And then also, Mike Weber was added from Ohio State last season. So a lot of guys are going to be competing for spots there, and nobody is really a shoo-in. I don't, it kind of reminds me a little bit of like 2014-ish when, you don't really have like a main guy behind, Eddie Lacy and James Starks, and you kind of need somebody to emerge, and this could be a really big opportunity for all those young men.
Yeah, I think Hill is going to be right in that mix right from the get-go for that number 3 running back spot. That is a spot you have to know who that guy is going to be when you're going into any given game on Sunday, and that strikes me as a completely wide open competition when training camp rolls around, and probably going to be decided, quite frankly, in the preseason games when the pads go on and you actually see whether these guys can break tackles and all that. Practice is practice, but when it comes to running backs, you've got to do it when the lights are bright.
Yeah, and with special teams too, to throw that in there. They need guys that can really assert themselves in that way, and yes, there are some core guys coming back, but this improvement they're looking for on special teams isn't just all the kickers and punters and long snappers and maybe Amari Rodgers. It's the core players, and those final jobs, especially with this added flexibility with the practice squad, you have to be able to really assert yourself in order to be that guy.
Yeah, no question. Well, with that, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. That is a wrap on the 2021 Packers draft class. Be sure to follow all of our coverage of the team. Wes and I will have some follow-up stories on the draft picks here in the coming days and weeks on Packers.com. And next week we got the schedule release, Wes. The schedule is going to be coming out. We'll talk about that.
I liked it better when it was in April.
Yeah, I did too.
We got to get back to that.
Yeah.
But hey, it's still exciting.
It's going to be it'll give us another topic for another show next week.
It'll also let us know how many times we're going to be short on sleep next season.
We will definitely find that out. For Wes, I am Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you next time.